Hello, this is Jack Baldwin with Reynard Architectural Designs. I'm one of the managing partners at Reynard, and you're listening to our first Ask an Architect podcast episode. Today, I'm recording with a good friend of mine, James Knight. He and I have been friends for many years. We ran a half marathon together down in Savannah, Georgia in 2019. We worked together at Baldwin Architectural Group, my father's architectural company. And he got together with me recently just to talk about the architectural design process, particularly the different deliverables and how we develop them for our clients. We put together this podcast as an effort to help our clients, potential clients, partners, anyone interested in architecture really, just understand more about what goes on in an architectural design project. We're going to talk about inspiration, style. We're going to talk about how architecture develops, mostly around residential home design is what we're focused on as a company. And so my hope is when we were recording this episode and the other episodes that we're going to be recording, that you'll learn a little bit more about architecture. You learn more about kind of the nuts and bolts of what goes on in an architectural design process. We're hoping that people who are curious about building their own home or designing their own home would learn a little bit more about architecture and why they would need an architect. Um, and as we continue to record episodes, I'd love to hear your feedback and what you're looking for from these podcasts, what topics you'd like to hear us talk about. After all, it is Ask an Architect, and we do want to start getting questions from people who are curious about what they would want to know from an architecture firm. So with all that being said, I'm going to play our conversation that I had with James Knight. Hope you enjoy it. And here is Ask an Architect.
Hi, Jack. Hi, everybody.
Hey, James, how you doing? Now, James is coming to us. We are connecting via Zoom today. I'm here in Atlanta. James, you are in Sydney, Australia. Is that right?
I am in Sydney, yes.
Are you in Sydney exactly, or are you in one of the suburbs? I can't remember.
I travel around a lot. So, some weeks I'm in Sydney, some weeks I'm on the North Coast. I get to enjoy myself and travel from beach to beach. So
Life
it's
is
a
tough,
good
man.
lifestyle. Yes, it is, isn't it?
Traveling from beach to beach in Australia.
Laptops and Zoom, that's all my life is.
Well, we're taking advantage of the technology these days. So you are in Sydney. It is July 3rd right now as we're recording. I'm in Atlanta where it's kind of muggy and we're getting ready to celebrate the 4th of July. How's Australia in July? What's it like down there?
Sydney itself is kind of cold, being in winter. But, being able to travel means that I can go to warmer climates. I've traveled north for the weekend, so even though we don't celebrate 4th of July here, it is nice to get away for the weekend. So I'm up on what's called the Sunshine Coast, enjoying the weather.
Yeah, we're on opposite sides of the planet at the moment, and so it's opposite seasons, which is kind of fun. So
yeah, it is good.
Well, I'm glad to have you. James and I have been working together for nearly 3 years. We were with Baldwin Architectural Group together. We have done some projects with Reynard Architectural Designs, which is a residential architectural design company that we started this year in 2021. And the purpose of our podcast and our conversation is to just provide good, meaningful educational content to people who want to do residential design and want to learn about residential design. So we're going to do a 5-part series together is the plan. Today, we're going to talk mostly about the deliverables in an architectural project. What are some of the things that you get when you hire an architect? What are the I guess deliverables is the best term, but what are some of the deliverables that you get when you hire an architectural firm? At least from us, Reynard Architectural Designs. What are you going to get in your inbox when you work with us? We're also going to talk throughout. We'll probably do 2 parts on the design process. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the fun and exciting part that we love to do when we take on a project, is getting to get into the creative process, listen to our clients' ideas and turn them into sketches, renderings. What is the house going to look like when it's built? So we'll discuss the design process. And then there's kind of the not so sexy part of the architectural design process, which is the permitting and contractor selection, kind of the nuts and bolts. We're going to spend two conversations in the future talking about that, and how do you select the right contractor? What are the things that an approving entity is going to look for to get you an actual building permit so that you can build your home or do your remodeling project. So today we're talking about deliverables. James, tell me, what are some of the deliverables that we get into our clients' hands when we take on a project? We got floor plans for one. That's kind of the
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, because I think it's one of the reasons why you hire a design firm, an architect, an interior designer, or anything like that. You're thinking about the end product, but you don't really think about what they're trying to achieve and what they need to do. They're thinking for you, of course, of, the end product needs to have certain things in it when you're submitting for a construction permit, or you're going through zoning, or going through the building permit process. So we kind of narrow down in our own process. At Reynard, we narrow down into certain things that work for us. Different firms obviously have different targets, different goals that they want to achieve. But for us, to start with, we want to involve the client as much as possible. A lot of our clients, I would say, maybe like 85%
yeah.
already have a design in mind that they're trying to
Oh yeah.
achieve.
hmm
Yeah,
I would agree.
there's only a few that maybe come to us and they're like, look, I just have
Well,
land
even
and
if
I'm
it's an
trying to.
idea, even if it's
Yeah,
some kind of
they have
inspiration,
exactly. They have something in their mind, that's for sure.
right?
So then we
But
base.
But I think what comes
Yeah,
up
go
a
ahead.
lot, well, I just think what comes up a lot is, I've got an idea or I've got a dream, but I don't
Mm,
know necessarily why I need an architect. A lot
yeah,
of people will sketch up something and maybe take it to a builder or a contractor, um, or maybe they start doing it the quick and fast way. But I don't know that everybody understands like what they get when they take on an architectural contract.
yeah, exactly. So for us, I know we break it down into what we call phases of work, and that's like it's kind of based around the design process. So we'll start off with a first phase, four of total. So the first phase is going to be more your conceptual and schematic phase, where we'll take the client's ideas and we'll take the site that they've chosen, and we'll take any information on board that they've already got. Maybe that's photos of what they have. They've got the site. Maybe they've already chosen a contractor. Maybe they've got a survey already. Maybe they don't have a survey already. And all of this is part of this first phase. And we'll go out and we'll measure the existing, or we'll measure the site. We'll take photos of it. We'll walk through the site with them. And whether that's our design process may be different from other firms. So whether that's, me just talking to the client myself, or maybe you yourself, Jack, or one of your other designers maybe meets with the client and you go over things. One of the
Yeah.
great things that we've got is that, you can go out the site and you can take photos, you can take videos. Sometimes we do Zoom calls while you're there, and the client's there, and we can all talk together. All these sorts of things is the start of the project. And then once we kind of get like the ideas of what the client wants, then we move on to the second phase, which is going to be a design phase itself. We take the initial ideas and then we start getting creative, and we talk with the client more often. We get into the nuts and bolts of it. All right, so what are you really trying to achieve out of this? At this point we can start bringing in our design experience and being like, hey, look, what you've given us is great. Have you thought about like A, B, and C? Let's try and implement all these things. Some of them
Yeah. So
work out,
giving some
some of them
constructive
don't.
feedback. Yeah. And
Exactly.
that's a little bit of the push and pull that we do try to emphasize, is that
Mm.
um, they're we can come up with any idea. A client can
Yeah.
dream big, and um, I think an architect's job oftentimes is to give some guidance and direction to not just uh, what can be done, but how it should be done, and
Yeah.
and kind of give that you know that guidance along the way of cost of some kind of idea of where job costing can come from. And you can't necessarily go and get a contractor to quote out exactly how much their building cost is going to be without some framework of a floor plan, or a framework of how big this house is going to be, the square footage,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
one element to it, where I feel like our job is to give our clients something that can at least be context for the conversation.
Yeah,
Because everybody,
exactly. You
we can come up and say, I want to build a house. Well, how much is that going to cost you?
Yeah, the more information the client has to give to their contractor or anyone who's involved, the better. The more accurate the quote can be from your contractor and from the subcontractors. If you go in there just saying, "Hey, look, I have a site, I have a design theory in mind," they're gonna
Hmm.
just quote you a square footage price. But if you go in there and you say, "Look, it's going to be these exact things. We've really thought this out. We've worked with all these people on it," they're going to be able to really get into that quote and look at your bench tops, or this is how the space is going to
Right.
look, and this is what we're trying to, and then they'll be able to nail it down to more of a specific sort of number for you.
Well, and that's an important part of the process is, and I do think it's important to point out that part of the deliverables are not just floor plans. That floor plans are very
Yeah.
important. Obviously, yeah, a site survey, which we don't necessarily do the site survey, but having that in hand to go with where your house is going to sit on that plot. Um, so the floor plans are extremely important. Being able
Yeah.
to say, hey, this is a square footage, this is the number of floors on this house, but also getting into the specifications. And that's part of the process. Is you alluded to that too, like which type of cabinets are we looking at, which type of exteriors are we looking at, which kind of a roof are we looking at. That's part of the
Yeah.
design process, and we start kind of putting some color and shape to that, so that when you do have that set of floor plans and those elevations and those renderings, which are all part of a package with us, those are something you can take and start getting down to actual building cost, actual materials, time, and labor.
Yeah. And maybe you don't choose like the specifics with us, maybe you choose them
Hmm.
with your interior designer, or maybe
Hmm.
you take that through to the contractor and the contractor helps you source it. So
Yeah.
it can be as detailed as you need it to be at the time. If you're just looking for, what do I need to take to the city or the county, then we
Hmm.
can go as basic as that, or you can go all the way through and be like, look, we want you to really look at everything to do with the house, and then we'll go to the contractor with that at the end. But
Yeah.
another part of it is involving these other parties, contractor, engineer, interior designer, whoever's involved during the design process. You don't want to surprise your contractor at the end and then come up with a huge figure that you weren't expecting. You want to involve them, halfway through, or maybe you've already got a contractor involved and they can be part of the process. They can be part of the phone calls. Look, this is what we've seen. This is what we need to fix. They are the ones who are building it.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of valuable knowledge to bring to the table.
Yeah. And I think that's an important aspect to point out, is that type of partnership and that liaison that we play, that role that we play in the process of, it's not
Yeah.
just the client and the architect sitting down and dreaming up sky's the limit type of house, but early on involving your contractor, early on identifying some kind of a budget, so that what kind of a house are we designing from the beginning. You mentioned the permitting process, which is something that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail on another episode, but I think that's an
Mm.
important aspect of this, is that a good architect is going to try to anticipate what the approving entity, and I say approving entity, I'm talking about a city or county. Typically, we work in the state of Georgia right now, so it's, we'll have counties or municipalities or cities that will be the approving entity for giving a building permit. And so a good architect is going to know a little bit about what you're going to need in order to get your building permit. One of the things
Yes.
they more often than not are going to ask for are floor plans that are designed by an architect. They may or may not ask for an architectural stamp. We've found that's not always the case, that a stamp by a licensed architect is required. So that does allow us to just get floor plans and elevations in our clients' hands a lot of times, and at least provide the detailed design. But then there's also the structural parts. That's something we like to touch on too. So talk to me a little bit about the structural. What goes on there? Because we have foundation plans, we have roofing plans, or drawings, I should say.
Yeah.
What are some of the
So we're
structural design
finding,
elements?
yeah. So we're finding more and more that cities and counties want to see these structural plans. In a
Hmm.
lot of cases, they're more important than architectural plans, because it's the engineer who signs off on the framing and the foundations to ensure that the building stands up.
So maybe, I mean, this is a dumb question, or maybe it sounds dumb, but just but just because some people might not know,
Mm.
what are we talking about when we say foundation and framing and roofing? Like, what are those different structural elements actually mean?
So if I was to describe it in the simplest sort of form, foundation is anything that is from the ground down. So
Hmm.
you're talking, if you're a house with a concrete slab, it's the concrete
Yeah.
slab that we're talking about. It's the thickness of the slab, and it's the footings that run around the edge. It's the footings that run underneath any load bearing walls.
Yeah.
But it's also, if you have columns, maybe you have a deck or something like that, and you have some piers going out or columns going out supporting the deck. It's the foundations or the concrete underneath supporting that column. So that's what we're talking about when it comes to foundations in a very simple
Yeah.
way. And then the framing involves anything from the floor framing, it's just the wood that's spaced at specific distances. Um, the framing, including the beams, any columns and things like that hold up the floor, that hold up the walls. This incorporates things that are like the doors. Some doors are basic. If it's a 3-foot wide door, we don't really have to worry about it because the load is going to be distributed amongst the frame appropriately. But if it's maybe a 12-foot opening, you have to think about the beam that goes above the door to spread that load out to the columns either side of the door, and spread that weight and that forces down to the foundations themselves. And then you go up to the ceiling framing, the roof framing. We have a lot of interesting modern farmhouses now, a lot of
Hmm.
interesting
Yeah.
contemporary modern houses now. You have a lot of overhanging sort of roofs, overhanging decks,
Yeah.
all those sorts of fun stuff. And
Yeah.
all of this sort of set that we'll get from an engineer, and we work closely with a few engineers. Oftentimes we draw the framing ourselves, and we bring the consultant in to just be like, hey, look, this is the types of beams, these are the spacing, these are the, all the different elements. So we review them together. We bring the client in and explain those at the time with them. Look, this is why your floor needs to be this thick. This
Right.
is why the roof, if you want to have, 6 foot of overhang, this is why it needs to be metal instead of wood. All those sorts of questions we can discuss with an engineer. And I know we both like to bring in an engineer. As soon as like these sort of complicated questions come up during the design
Yeah.
process, it's like, all right, well, let's start bringing engineers and contractors in, so we
Well,
make sure we get this right.
yeah, and thanks for indulging the question, because a
Yeah.
lot of where that comes from is to say that for us as a design firm, we know more often than not that's going to be a required part of the process, and so we
Mm,
try to incorporate that in. But sometimes it's easy to kind of gloss over that. It would be very easy to say, yeah, I just really want to design this amazing house. But how is it going to stand? How is it going to function? How's it going to actually structurally be sound? And that's part of the design process just as much as the appearances. And so we like to do the or be a part of the structural drawings aspect as much as possible, because we can incorporate that into the design. We can
Yeah.
actually marry the two, the architectural set and the structural set, a little bit more easily when it's our firm doing it together. Um, and then yes, we do want to engage with an engineer very early on and not have surprises. So when we engage in a project that we know a structural set is going to be required by the city or the county, and they're going to want to see that this building will actually stand, it gives us a lot of confidence when we submit that with a stamp already on it. We've already
Mm.
engaged with an engineer. They've either come out on site, but they've definitely looked at our structural set and said, yes, this building will be sound once it's built, or no, you need to make some changes and modifications before I'll give you the seal of approval. So
Yeah. Yes, exactly. You've nailed it there. Yeah.
and so yeah, that's part of the deliverable set, and sometimes that's not the first thing that people think about when they think about hiring an architect. They don't. I think in my mind, when I was just starting to work with my father's company a few years ago, in my mind, like, yeah, we do floor plans. That's pretty much it. And then the rendering is just the kind of the pretty picture of those floor plans, but
Yeah.
there's so much more to it. I think what was some of the things we hit on was just the design process, how we engage, um, how we get into the client's world, so to speak. What's this world going to look like? What's the site going to look like? What's the house going to look like, as far as how big of a house we're putting on the site? What kind of talk to me a little bit about inspiration, James. As far as how do you start collecting inspiration and incorporating that into a design? So if somebody comes up to you, we got a new client, we got a new plot of land. Um, what's some of the language and some of the methods that we use to turn an idea? Maybe a client's really good at describing it, and maybe they're not, but what's the process like from taking inspiration and turning it into an actual design?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we we definitely get quite a wide range of projects. I think
Hmm.
what we've
Yeah,
worked over the years.
I
Yeah,
was, I was looking at our site before we got on the call, and then some of these houses, they're gorgeous, but they're so different in style.
yeah, and there's a lot of firms that will just work in one sort of style. Maybe that's contemporary modern, or maybe that's
Hmm.
farmhouse, or whatever it is. But I think that one of the things that we've prided ourselves on is being able to work with anyone that comes with it to us, within reason, and any
Yeah,
type of design, kind of aesthetic that they're going with. So our process, I believe, begins with the client themselves. Unless they come with like just empty land and they're like, look, we just want to put a 3-bedroom house on here, we don't care what you do with it, then I'll have a bit of fun with it. But when we're working for a client and I don't have that freedom, it really starts with them. If they have a house on there already, are they trying to keep the same look, or are they trying to change it and update it to a new look? And then once they are able to establish that sort of pattern of thought, like when we'll do this through different methods depending on the person, sometimes they have 50 photos that they want to show us, and sometimes they're not really quite sure. They've seen a few different things. I mean, some people come in and they're like, look, we just want to do modern farmhouse. And then some
yeah.
people come in and they're like, we want to do a mashup between craftsman and Spanish villa. It doesn't really work, but okay. So some people know and some people don't, and it's our task to then start talking to them about what are you trying to fit in there, what are you trying to achieve, what type of materials. And we often rely a lot on Pinterest because it's just an easy platform, really, isn't it? Because you can invite them to look at and pin their own photos, and they can spend hours doing that. We'll spend our own time doing that. So it really begins with that sort of thing. And then so there's an aesthetic sort of side of it to the design. Then there's the design where we know how floor plans kind of work, and if you're trying to fit 3 bedrooms in and 2 bathrooms, or maybe you want an ensuite in every room, we kind of know the sizes. that go into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the design aspect, that we specialize because we study for 5 or 6 years at university, and that's everything to do with materiality and sustainability and how things work together, and what type of technology is going to go into the house to get it built. So there's quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah, as I was listening to you, I was thinking about just how much of a task that is for us. Pinterest is certainly helpful, collecting images. A lot of times we'll set up a folder, a shared folder, and have our clients dump photos into that folder. Or I'll have a client who just texts me constantly, I like this, I like this, I like this. And the inspiration part can be so much fun. And I've seen some clients who collect almost every image under the sun of stuff that they like, which is great. And I've always said, as we're engaging early, there's never too much. There's not too much images you can share, ideas that you can share. What's the challenge then is to focus that. So, you and I read through a book together a couple of years ago called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those habits that just came to mind as we were talking is begin with the end in mind. So having that goal, and I think that's also the trick too. An architect is not tasked with, hey, here's my design, do it. Um, Execute. An architect, I think a good one is tasked with taking design inspiration and having a goal. So what's the end going to look like? Already very early on, even if it's a sketch, even if it's a rough sketch to start with, because it is a process, but sketching out an idea of here's what the end product might look like and going from there. I remember seeing some rudimentary sketches you did of a tree house that we built a couple years ago. That it doesn't look, the sketch that you did doesn't look exactly like the building, but it was beginning with the end in mind. We had a sketch of what it could look like and went from there. And having that goal, having that visual of something that's focused, I think that's the key. Is that our job is to come alongside the client, take their great ideas, take their inspiration, create some kind of a vision for the future of what that building will actually look like when it's executed and built, and then go from there. Because you're right, if we're all over the place, I want a $3 million home on a $250,000 budget, it's not going to happen. If I want to mix some, two very, very polarizingly different design styles, it's not going to happen. So, we can have tastes all over the place and budgets all over the place, but I think a good architect will come in and say, here's realistically what you can do with this land that you selected, with, the size, the topography. Here's realistically what you can do with the images that you sent me, with that type of frame, that type of flair, that type of style. Here's realistically what we can do. And then here's where we can get creative. And here's where we can have some fun. And it's kind of that dance. And I think that's what's exciting about what we get to do for our clients, is taking those ideas and then turning them into a livable reality. So, but yeah, I like that. Just thinking about the end in mind as we get started. I think that's something that often we take for granted. I think we do a really good job of talking to our clients very early on about what their goals are, and making sure that's a very clear stated purpose in the process.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, we're getting better at this every day. And, we try and educate the client as we go. And, sometimes I know we're getting better at, pulling the process up if it's getting out of hand as well. I was just kind of thinking of some of our current projects while you're talking, and just, some of them are like, the design ideas are correct and they know what they want, but what they had already previously done on the site may have not been correct. And then we have to pull the project up a little bit and like, hold on a second. Let's just make sure that we get this right before you end up spending any more money on this or any of, materials or building. And let's just go back a couple of steps, make sure we get this correct. and make
Right.
sure you get what you want in the end, because we can get there. You can do it really messy and spend too much money doing it, or we can stop right now, go back a step, make sure that the design is what you want and that it's done correctly.
Yeah. And again, I mean, that kind of goes back to the question, like why, there's been a lot of people who maybe are asking themselves, why do I need an architect?
Mm,
That and we've encountered that, people go out and start building, or they just go out and hire somebody and they have a hand-drawn sketch, and a contractor or quote unquote contractor, quote unquote builder will look at it and go, yeah, I could make that happen. And some places are very lax with their permitting process, and some of them don't require the same amount of attention to the permitting as others do.
yeah,
Um,
true.
and so when that question comes up, I do kind of answer along those lines of, a good architect will not just give you floor plans, elevations, and something to just go take and slap together, but a good architect will walk you through the design process, walk you through the permitting process, walk you through selecting a good contractor, holding them accountable, finding something that's buildable, I think is a good term.
Yeah,
What can you build within your budget? Helping you incorporate your tastes. I mean, that's why people come to us. They're not necessarily just needing a set of plans to get the permit, but they actually do want, um, something that they have some design elements to. The structural part that we talked
mhm,
about, getting the structural drawings done right, that your architect can help you with, and then going and finding a good engineer, because how many people, homeowners, potential homeowners, are sitting around with a list of engineers in their pocket? That's
that's a good point. I mean, most of us
yeah,
don't. I know we took a long time to find engineers that we were happy to use.
right,
So for a
yeah,
layperson or a homeowner to be able to find these people, unless you know someone, it's very hard.
yeah. And these people we work with are working full time most of the time, and
Yes, exactly.
so yeah. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer question. Why do I hire an architect? What are the deliverables? But also,
Mm,
it's not a no-brainer. It's not something to be taken for granted when you're thinking about the
yeah,
design process and the building process. Um, and so yeah,
I think
the big part of this. Yeah, sorry, James, what were you gonna
I think you did raise a good point though, because we've had a couple of clients now that have come to us over the years, and the treehouse project that you were referring
say?
to
Yeah,
before was a good example. Was the county? This is both counties. The examples I have in my mind are both from the county, and they tell the client, look, all you need is a site plan and maybe an outline, maybe describe what you want in the floor plan, but they're not
right.
requesting a lot of detail. And that is almost a trap set by your county. They're not meaning to do it. They don't have any malice behind it. But
Yeah,
in both cases, specifically with the treehouse, it took longer to get it through permitting than we ever imagined, because when we sat down with the county, they said, look, we don't require any of these things. But then when we submitted, and we did a full set of design drawings, floor plans. We even did engineering. Even they said they didn't require it. They did require it in the end. They requested it.
yeah.
They requested more information than they ever said that they needed. They needed things that, we're talking about septic tanks and stuff like that. And I was like, well, hold on a second. All you said you needed at the beginning was a site plan and how many square feet this was going to be on the land. And I think that talks to a lot of like why it's important to hire a professional team to get involved. You don't realize it at the time, and you may go off some faulty information that comes out of the county or the city, but it's just these things that an architect or a design team will help you figure out. And if you do get pulled up on them, you have a little bit of support in your corner to turn around and get it
Yeah.
fixed and dealt with as soon as possible.
And those are some hard lessons that we've learned over the years, you and I together too. And that's something we're constantly learning and adapting to, is that, we do want to be a resource, and we want to ask more and more questions ahead of time,
Mm,
rather than later in the process. And we're trying to all the time to get better about that, where our clients are not surprised by, well, and like you said, every county's different, every city's different. So we do need to take that same approach, where we're a little, not just agnostic of, what could come up, but we're actually being proactive about, what could come up and asking questions, partnering with contractors early on. But doing that early on is so important, and getting
Mhm.
cost estimates early on is so important, because otherwise, yeah, we can try to slip something in or do the cheap and dirty way. And and clients sometimes they're a little bit more driven to get things done, because they feel inspired, or they feel like they're under the gun, or they're trying to save money. But really, what saves money is when you really do anticipate things and do it right the first time around.
Yeah, yeah,
That ends up, even
exactly.
if you feel like you're spending so much money up front, even if it feels like such a burden to take on, I'm like, trust me, it will pay off to do it right the first time. You'll end up spending so much more money to correct. Spending money to correct problems is so much more expensive than spending money to get out ahead of problems. And again, we're trying to evolve all the time as a design firm, and get out ahead of that, so we're not chasing those problems. We're actually anticipating and asking better questions, and that's something we're learning all the time too.
Yeah, 100%. I
Yeah.
mean, we do, as the codes change, and they do change all the time, and they may be different codes required by different counties and cities. It's just a matter of doing the best that you can, and then you may not be able to get everything in the first try that you ever do anything. Like when we submit a design to the client, I know that sometimes I change the design on purpose to create a conversation. And sometimes
Yeah.
when we're submitting to the city and the county, sometimes it can go along those lines. Sometimes we know exactly what they're expecting and what they require. But sometimes it's a new employee maybe looking at the drawings from the permitting side of things, and they're like, hey, listen, like the codes have changed slightly. We need they've been amended. We need an electrical plan now, which we
Yeah.
didn't require that last year, but now we do.
Right.
So it's a developing sort of process, and so we are learning, and
Where's the
we like to.
textbok, like
Exactly.
where's the, yeah, like where's, we can have all the degrees and training in the world, but then getting into the actual nitty gritty of things, like you said. I
Yeah.
mean, we had this pandemic that affected things greatly last year, and then codes
Oh yes.
change, requirements change, or it could be elections, people who get voted into office over
Exactly.
local counties, and things
So yeah,
change
it comes.
constantly.
Exactly, and it comes back to what your first initial question was: the deliverables, and we just have to make sure that we get the majority of them correct. We get the
Yeah.
ones that we know we need correct, and in the set of drawings that you submit, that whether that's floor plans, site plans, elevations and sections, and there's a lot of detailing that goes along with those sort of things. We just all those become part of the phases of work that we set in front of the
Yeah.
client. It's very important for all of us to understand and get a part of.
Well, I learned something new every time we talk, James. And so I really hope the folks who got to listen to this conversation were learning something. That was the goal, was to just keep, we try to keep our ear to the ground on the design process and what clients need in order to get their homes built. And that's where that's why we exist. We want to see folks get into a home that they've designed, that they feel good about, that they spent good money on, meaning they didn't have to spend more money than they should have to see their home built. And I think that's what we're striving for as an architectural design firm, is seeing that become a reality. And so learning as much as you can is the best way to spend good money, and the best way to not chase after problems, but to get out ahead of them, is to be well informed and well educated. That's our goal in these conversations. Is So thank you, James, for just sharing the things that you've learned over the years.
Yeah,
As not just your training as an architect, but also spending time working in the state of Georgia with us to
it's been
understand
fun.
that process. It has,
Yeah,
man. And we've
and
gotten
we're
some
going to
good projects
continue.
done
But
together.
yes, we have. We've got a couple on the books. It's a fun process. It's good. We learn
Yeah,
something from every single one of them.
for sure. So next time we talk, we'll set up some time, and we'll start getting into probably the little bit more the design process, what the creative design process looks like.
The
Walk
fun
you through
stuff.
that. That's the fun
Yeah.
stuff. And then we'll talk a little bit. It can be the permitting process, and I'm not sure if it can be fun or not, but it's certainly a necessary part of the process. And
Yeah.
we're going to touch on that too soon, where we talk about what it's like to get a permit, what are some questions you should ask. And we touched on a lot of that
Yeah.
today, but taking more focused conversation around that. So this has been Ask an Architect. I'm Jack Baldwin with Reynard Architectural Designs, and James calling in from Australia. Thank you for joining us, one of our
Yeah, it's been my
lead
pleasure.
project designers. Yeah, well, it's your evening there, so I will let you wrap up and head to bed here soon after you watch some YouTube videos. And I'm getting my 4th of July weekend started, so I appreciate
Sounds
the time,
good.
James.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.